What's up, everybody, and welcome back into the Play the Fight Song College Football Show. Big episode tonight because we got to talk a lot on the G5 playoff that was proposed. We've saved this. We've had it on the back burner for a week. We needed to dedicate more time to it. If you haven't noticed yet, we are down a guy. Reese is serving this country, as we all know, so he is on assignment in Louisiana. We miss him entirely. He might
Yeah,
drop in the comments.
Yeah, word has it. Word has it the
believe so.
communists are now in the bayou, throughout the swamps. We're gonna have to go in there and fight the Reds. That's all I'm saying. That's why he's down there.
That's what I heard too. He might drop in the comments. I think he already reposted this episode on his X account. So shout out Reese if you're out there watching. We miss you, but the other boys
Watch out
are
for
here.
the Gators.
Watch out for those Gators. Jake, how we doing tonight? You ready to talk on the Group of 5 playoff?
Yeah,
Possible
I'm
playoff.
ready to talk some ideas. Been kind of in all of my free time that I have been spitballing my own ideas and what I would do if I was a college football commissioner, because I know I will be eventually. I know that that's what I'm destined to be. So we're gonna do it the best we can, but we're still thinking of Reese down in the bayou.
Do you think there's kids out there now, JP, that what's your dream job? And they write down I want to be the college football playoff commissioner. Do you think they're out there?
I think they're out there, but I think they are sadly mistaken on how stressful and how much you would actually hate that job. I think most people would hate it.
That's
it's
good
like
parenting.
the presidency. It's like the presidency. It's like everybody wants to grow up and be president, and then you kind of get on and you go, who the fuck would want to be president?
Yeah, it might be. I think it would be up there for me. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, just how much I indulge my life into college football, I think I would put the president right up next to the college football commissioner. That's a big job to fill. I mean, when they get that route,
some would say the leader of the free world is a big job. I would agree.
Yeah, and that's both leader of free world of football and presidency. Yes, absolutely. They're both equal. But tonight, here's the schedule. We're going to take you through recent news, as always. Then we're going to go into the transfer portal. That portal closes tonight at midnight. That is Tuesday, April 30th. That closes tonight. And there's a lot of people out there still. So we'll see what happens, or if they stuck there. I'm sure there's going to be stuff going on after, but not legally. And then we will close out the episode with that discussion on the CBS Sports article. We'll give you the Spark Notes version of it, and then we're going to break it down. We'll hit you with a link on one of our platforms in case you want to read it yourself. There's a lot of substance in it, but let's do it. Let's go into recent news. Let's talk the NFL draft, which was this past week. We are going to briefly mention the top teams. I do remember off the top of my head since somebody took them out of my notes, but Michigan led it with 13 draft picks, and then followed up by, I want to say, was it Georgia? Yeah, Georgia, and then Washington, Alabama, and Florida State were tied, correct?
Yep. Those are the top three.
Those are the numbers. Anything that jumped off for you guys? Obviously, Michigan expected to have a big draft. They lost a lot of talent. J.J. McCarthy goes first for them to the Vikes. And then the surprise pick of the draft, Michael Penix at 9 from Washington. Got some mileage on him. Any surprises from you, college-wise or just professional-wise, where they got picked? Jake?
I'm interested to see how this Michigan class kind of shakes up in the NFL and how their careers really pan out. They had 13 picks, but was there what, 1 or 2 in the top 2 rounds? And then it came from the 3rd round on. There was just a ton. So I'm interested to see where this team should, and obviously we want to, JJ McCarthy is going to be the biggest headline out of all of those guys, especially Parks being a Vikings fan. Is he the next guy? Interested to see that, but we always look at back, even in 3 years down the road, we talk about that LSU team all the time as Jefferson's career, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as their careers start to pan out, Joe Burrow, we really talk about how talented that 2019 team was. I'm interested to see if there's 3 years down the road, are we going to talk about how good JJ McCarthy is in the NFL in that entire Michigan class?
We got a quick shout out. He is in the comments. Our boy's here. He is here in presence, but no reason. I don't know. I honestly, when I thought about it, I would rather see JJ McCarthy off the rip than Sam Darnold. I feel like we've gotten seen what Sam Darnold's going to do in the NFL
Zach
already.
Wilson, Bo Nix, or Jarrett Stidham?
Yeah,
dude, one of those
I'm not the biggest Bo Nix hater. I wanted
so it could be worse there, Cam.
Yeah, I wanted Bo Nix. I really don't think that's a bad one, JP. I think if he's going to have a similar career, if it's like bad, it's going to be like Zach Wilson, which is unfortunate because they're like very similar in their play styles and what they looked like in college. But JJ McCarthy, he is a winner at the end of the day. I mean, the guy knows how to win football games with good teams. So hopefully he can do something in Minnesota because it's a team that's never won a Super Bowl in the history of its franchise. So, JP, any takeaways from the draft from you outside of the Broncos taking Bo Nix?
I think kind of the more interesting storyline that I've started to realize is like the teams that don't get a ton of people drafted doesn't necessarily mean that they did not have a good football team last year. They could be young. I think that's one of the reasons Iowa State didn't have a ton. Young team. You could have a team full of guys who maybe didn't love their spot in the draft this year, or a team that has a bunch of guys who aren't going to have massive NFL careers. So they're like, I can stay in college on a really good football team, continue to win games, fight for a national title, and make good NIL money. Like, interesting to see, like, you can kind of see where teams are back building, like who didn't have a ton of draft picks and who is just rising, right? Guys staying in college to get, maybe it's a bigger paycheck per year, like in NIL dollars, than it is to sign a undrafted free agent thing or a late 5th, 6th, 7th round guy, right? So that's something I kind of paid attention to. I watched the draft. I'm obviously more of a college football guy than an NFL guy, but it's just interesting to me. I think Parks, I think you found this on X or Twitter or whatever it is now. Guys are like just finding out that dudes can run routes and there are good football players in college football. I think there's a Ladd McConkey guy, and like that was Ladd McConkey's thing, and his ability to run routes and get open. And somebody goes, "Do you see this route?" And you're like, how do people not know this? Right? Like, it's
that's why his team went 15-0 and beat everybody by 30. Like, you didn't think that he was good when he played at Georgia? Like, he just automatically got good when he was drafted? Or I get confused on that as well. But I do want to go back to you quickly. Were you surprised that DeJean fell to the second round like he did? I mean, obviously a lot of mock drafts have him in the first, but one of the better defensive backs at Iowa and probably their history, if not the best. Were you surprised that he fell to the second round?
I think it had more to do with the injury and the later pro day behind all of it, because he's a little bit still behind in the process, maybe health wise, not behind, but like kind of delayed to the guys that got to go to the combine and do that stuff. But to second day, I think it was completely based on how the draft went that night. The amount of quarterbacks and offensive weapons that flew off the board. I think people were like, well, shit, if I wait to grab a receiver or grab this quarterback, they're not going to be there. So I have to. So maybe some draft plans changed within that moment.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to the next point. That's the NFL draft. Just wanted to touch on the college aspect of it a little bit. But the next point goes to me. That is the Nebraska spring game happened this past weekend. 60,000 strong in Memorial Stadium to get our first look at Dylan Raiola in a Nebraska football uniform, and it didn't really disappoint. I'll say that. I mean, the first drive he comes out, he's clean. Nebraska didn't show much offensively, but he made his throws, and some of them were absolute beauties. We saw some young talent. I think we saw one defensive starter put on a uniform, so we didn't really get to see anything from the defensive side of the ball, but I think Raiola really stole the show. But I did see good progression from the secondary quarterbacks too. Harburg looked good. He actually threw the football away, which is something he never does. Daniel Kalen looked pretty good. He made some throws. Wasn't really any turnover issues. Dante Dowdell, the Oregon transfer, was splendid, but I'll dive all into that on Thursday night, doing a live show, recapping the entire Nebraska spring, recruiting, all that good stuff. I'll throw that over. Did you guys get a chance to watch the Raiola highlights? I know it was all over Twitter, the hype train coming from On3 and things like that. But what did you take away from it? Jake, did you get to see the highlights?
I did. Yeah. I mean, he looked comfortable at least. I guess I don't really. I saw the highlights from Twitter. So yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So there wasn't a ton of pressure on him, and I don't know how did Nebraska actually like splits it up? Do they split it like second stringers versus the first team, or how do they kind of mix it up? Or
I don't even know if it was that. Like the defensive backfield, like there was one or two guys. Bly Hill was supposed to start for us this year. I tore something. And then we lost another wide receiver, Demetrius Bell, young receiver that was probably going to make an impact. He's out for the year now. So we lost 2 to injury, but on the defensive side, no, we didn't really play anybody. But I think just the accurate throws that didn't land in the other team's arm, no matter how much they were going to be the hype.
That was going to be my question. Was
that helps.
Like I got a couple highlights. So like maybe think like 30 seconds to a minute of just a couple plays with like I didn't watch it live, but was it just the feeling of seeing a guy comfortable and not forcing things while not forcing things, making the correct throw? Like did it just feel a little more comfortable rather than like superstar and waiting? Because obviously it's his first snaps with a live audience in Lincoln. So
Yeah,
I was just curious what you actually saw and felt.
it felt like a guy who actually knew what he was doing at the position, which we haven't had in a while because Harburg was running back there with happy feet last year. It was his first college snaps. Jeff Sims, I don't have an answer for Jeff Sims. I don't know what he looked like. I mean, he's looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane's the best way to describe Jeff Sims from what I saw, but he just looks like a quarterback, if that makes any sense. Like he's got comfortable, slow feet like KJ Jefferson, and he's on target with throws and on time. There's a couple that blew me away, like the throw in the corner of the end zone on a 2-point conversion was unbelievable. I don't know how it got there, but we haven't really had a highly touted quarterback like this in a long time, if ever. So I think the initial hype that we were thrown at, like this is a 5-star quarterback, this is like the immediate impact you would get at Georgia and Texas and all these teams that normally get these. I think it's just bringing it to a new team and a team that's been so thirsty for one of those or something even serviceable that it just made everything great. So I nothing stuck out to me. I don't want to fully just, get aroused at the idea of having this all year long, but it looked good. It
Something to
builds
build
the hype.
off of.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
You got Thursday to cover all that and get a little more arousal for you.
Yes, right. We got to get the arousal back going on Thursday. We got a lot of recruiting to talk about. So tune in Thursday night. Should have a fun one there for all Nebraska needs. To the next point, let's talk a little bit on Iowa. Actually, all the mid three made the news a little bit, but former Iowa offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz will join the Maryland Terrapins as an offensive analyst. Shocking, JP?
I think it's a shocking thing that he landed at Maryland of all places.
Yeah.
Conference, like what did Maryland?
It's good to see him land on his feet and like find a job. I always thought it was going to be like an offensive line job or something in the NFL because he has so many connections within the NFL. Maybe this is the kind of that period where people need to forget about like what it was like the last couple of years in Iowa City and like all the backlash with it, and then just let him like smooth back into the coaching realm, probably where he wants to be. I can't imagine he wants to be in Maryland. I mean, I don't know. But it'd be interesting to see in like 2 years where he ends up. I can't imagine this is going to be a long-term thing, but just something to keep him on his feet because the guy's like, he's well respected within the industry, in the program. He's a very good offensive line coach, but it just didn't work out in his new quarterback's offensive play calling. Your dad being the coach, like none of that really worked out in his favor, and we didn't perform well. So like that's the big one, right? So let's see in 2 to 3 years. I just want to see where he is now, but I thought in the Big Ten at Maryland of all places was odd because that's not very Ferentz-esque, that offense.
You think he walks in? You think he like walks into the meeting with the coaches and goes to Loxley, Mike, you gotta slow it down. This is going way too. It's like that Uber ride Saturday night in Omaha a couple of years back. When
what's it going to be like being?
They're not going too fast, but I think they're just going so fast. I'm Brian Ferentz in that scenario.
What's it going to be like being an offensive analyst of a offense that has a quarterback that can move around? That's MJ Morris. No, that's at Maryland now. Like,
yes,
the guy can move around a little bit, make some plays. Like, it's going to be like, this is what the 21st century looks like in football. I was just curious.
And I think people would easily forget, if you're not in the Midwest or the Big Ten realm of things, then you wouldn't know that Brian Ferentz is actually like an extremely good tight end and offensive line coach. Like he's going to offer something just because he doesn't have the play calling sheet, and he's definitely not going to touch it at Maryland, but he still offers something to the team, especially a team that doesn't have the most dominant offensive line in the history of college football ever.
Yeah, they're not a trenches team. Which is why I was also kind of shocked. I can't imagine they would have fired their offensive line coach to hire him for that. But as an analyst, there's certain rules of what you can and can't do, where you can and can't be during games. So I'm interested to see what his role actually turns out to be there.
All right, on to the next one. Let's go to the mid three, the final piece. Iowa State Farmageddon will hit the road on to Ireland. They will play in Dublin opening week. This is week 0, 2025. They're playing August 23rd, I believe, in 2025 in what is it called? Aviva Stadium in Dublin. Nebraska played there a couple years ago. Last year it was Notre Dame Navy, absolute ass kicking, but Farmageddon should bring us a good one. Jake, I'll go to you. Exciting news? You may be booking a trip.
Booking a trip to be determined. I definitely crossed my
Jake,
mind.
you don't seem like an Ireland guy. You don't seem like a guy who'd go to Ireland like, dude, this is fucking sweet.
Yeah, you don't, I agree.
You strike me more of the beach mountain guy.
No,
Like, those are very different, but like you seem like a beach guy.
I think I can switch it up. Like Ireland, if I go there, I need to play golf. I think that's got to be set aside for one day. So I'm in there. I've grown a little bit of a taste for Guinness, just because me and my buddy Max kind of make it a little thing now with
like
Notre Dame
gasoline.
games. So if
That's
I
not
could
good.
get some homegrown Guinness before an Iowa State game, that's something I've never done before. But
fair be warned, though, they run out of beer extremely fast over there. I believe that was the
one time
to that.
the credit card machine stopped working, so they started giving out beer for free, which could be an absolute nightmare. I don't think they know what they're getting into.
That's exactly what Iowa State fans, I think, are trying to achieve. But also, the game this year will actually be great. It's Florida State and Georgia Tech. That'll be a good kind of appetizer to our college football season. But I'm excited. Iowa State gets out of going to Manhattan that year too, and Kansas State's going to be really good next year with Avery Johnson with one full season under his belt and some young guys there. Kansas State fans are the ones who are making more of a fuss about it. They're losing a home game, and the argument is that they only get 6 home games in the year now. I don't get that argument. I'm just used to Iowa State normally doesn't play 7 home games in a year. I mean, they have kind of recently, but it's always been like 6 and 6. So to hear Kansas State fans complaining about having just 6 home games, I'm like, okay. I mean, that seems fairly normal to me, but I'm sure getting Iowa State away from a home game in October or November or whatever it would have been is kind of I see why they're a little disappointed, I guess.
We need to get you media credentialed if you get over there somehow.
Yeah.
So keep us posted, and we'll file for that. Hopefully, we'll get you on the field.
By then we'll have like 100,000 subscribers and everything. So
it may
like
be if
2
these
years
people would
down
hit
the
the
road.
subscribe and follow button. Good reminder. I love the plug. During this break, hit the subscribe button if you haven't right now. Hit the follow button on all the platforms, whatever platform you're on. Just double check that you're following. That's the easiest way to support the page. So we appreciate that.
I will say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
You're
The
good.
last point will be like, this may be, is this the first time in program history where like all of college football fans throughout the entire country have their eyes on an Iowa State game? Like there's just, there's always going to be a game that has their eyes. Even if Iowa State was really good, there's more than likely another game that day that might catch the average fan's eyes. This is the only game that's played that. Like this year, there's 4 games in week 0, and 3 of them are like FCS or Conference USA. And I'm going to imagine the same thing's going to go next year. So if you really like, all the diehards in college football will actually be watching this game. It's kind of interesting to note.
Regular season, I can hear the argument, but
you
would
also
think the Fiesta Bowl, right? Would be probably that's
yeah. I thought about
eyes.
probably the Fiesta Bowl, but also it was COVID, and I feel like some of the diehards kind of went away because there was nobody in the stands, and it was just like, why do I care about a 6-game Oregon team and Iowa State? Like, who's Iowa State? You know what I mean? I don't know.
I think a big part of that too is like maybe like everybody is going to be watching them, but you're also not getting Kansas State and Iowa State. You're getting Kansas State and Iowa State overseas. Like you're getting them in Ireland. It's going to be more about everything going on in Ireland rather than showing off fandom, program, campus, blah, blah, blah. Like everything you get with a primetime game to kind of, kids remember that stuff. They're not going to remember. They're going to remember this game maybe happened in Ireland, but they're not going to like, I don't know. I think that's the kind of missing piece.
Yes and no, I would agree. But like even 2 years ago when Nebraska played Northwestern over there, it was 85 Nebraska, 15% Northwestern. I think this is going to be a good showing out for both fan bases. I think both are obviously very similar. It's why there's a rivalry there. And I think it'll be pretty close in attendance between both groups. So I think that can make this matchup even more fun.
If you're wondering price, if you haven't gotten a chance to look at it, or if you're out there listening, like I wonder how much a fan's got to spend to get there. Nebraska ran a package where it was top to bottom, like bus to the airport, flight there, bus to the hotel, tours, all that stuff. It was like $2,700. I
Yeah,
was
I
not
think
in the financial situation to do it.
I think it was
I-
$5,000 for 2 people is what I saw, so that would make sense.
Yeah.
I checked, so I went through all of the packages this
Well-
year as a quote unquote Florida State fan. There's an 8-night stay, which is extreme. That's like
so long.
Is it though?
and
But you're going to Ireland. Like, why would you want to be there
well,
for 3 days?
You're going to
You lose
the
a day
8
of travel though, right?
basically.
I don't know.
And the 8-night stay is 3 different cities. So there's a 2-city option, there's a 3-city option, there's a golf package. The golf package runs from like $6,000 to $4,000 to
Goodness
$6,000.
gracious.
That 3-city option, the highest is like $7,000. That's just for one person, includes your airfare and tickets and all that stuff. But yeah, the lowest I saw, the lowest was like a 3-night stay in Dublin for $2,500.
Yeah,
That's
I
not
mean, but
too
that,
bad.
but then I assume night one's getting there. Depending on when you get there, it could be 6, 5 o'clock. There's one day gone. Next day's the game. Then you have a day in between. The next day after, maybe. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I feel like if you're gonna go to Ireland for a football game, like let's do.
Might as well
Ireland
make a
too.
trip out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You got to at that point when you're spending that much. But
I agree.
we'll keep you updated on all things Farmageddon when it comes to 2025. I am also very invested. I hope the social media team does a kick-ass job of trying to get Irish people to say Farmageddon. That's just easy content. It better be out there. But let's go to the next point, and that is the article that came out from Pete Thamel. We can drop the media. We'll go to that next. A little teaser. We are going to talk college football 25. We need to. But first, we want to talk about the article that came from Pete Thamel, and he is reporting that college sports are involved in deep, deep discussions on revenue sharing with the players. This is important. It's something that we expected to happen, but we also need to have a little talk about it. I mean, JP, what did you take away from the article? Is it something that shocked you? Is it something that need to be done? They give Bush his Heisman back. What do you got?
For me, this was inevitable, but it is funny to see the NCAA being like coming up with this idea, knowing they're going to get left in the dust. Like, you will no longer exist as an organization within the realm of specifically college football or even college athletics if it gets to that point. And so they went from no, we'll never pay somebody to maybe like if their name, image, or likeness is worth a couple dollars, or to free reign, to we are not going to give them some of the money that we make. Like within 5 years, it's just not even 5 years, 3 or 4.
Yeah,
it
yeah, I
seems
was
like
gonna
like
say.
it was quick. And it was just it's just interesting to see that. So inevitable, yes. Proper, yes. I'm just curious to really see when the first rebuttal is going to be. Like, when's the first time the players can be like, this isn't enough, right? Like, they
Yeah.
are not unionized. They don't have true representatives maybe that'll help them out to start. But I think anything for again, maybe the first 95% of players that are playing is more than enough, right?
And you got to think Arch Manning's going to be one of the first ones out there. That's not enough, just based off recent history. But Jake, what did you take away from this? Inevitable, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the NCAA dug their own grave. They've made so much money off these TV contracts the last 8 years, 7 or 8 years. I think it stems back to 2016. And they've just made so much, and they're not, like they said, they didn't want to share the pot, and their greed is probably what's going to be their downfall. I think they're looking at probably taking the NCAA to court in 2025. But there'll be talks throughout this whole thing, and it's not been made official. I advise anybody who's really interested on this, like Bud Elliott put like a really good 8-minute video on exactly what's going on. He works for Cover 3. He's also an attorney, so it helps out a ton of he's really smart at what this does and how this is explained. But yeah, man, you should have started giving these players at least a little bit of the cut out of those big TV contracts a long time ago. Maybe you wouldn't have had conference realignment. Maybe you wouldn't have this huge player empowerment era and NIL situation. And now I think they said something like they could owe up to $3 billion to former athletes in the past, I think, decade. And that's not just football. That's like swimming and everything else
That's
included.
insane.
And they're like, their argument might be to like, they might have to cut some of these non-generating revenue sports like a swimming or lacrosse or whatever that may be. And the other argument is you don't want to cut those other sports because your admissions are going to go down from just general students because you're eliminating more of the actual college atmosphere. Like they're going to feel like they're going to some college in a city or something like that if you take that away. So the NCAA's got their hands tied behind their back, and I think the domino is just going to start to trickling down pretty much, I would say, in the next few months.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic to follow. You brought up a good point. I didn't think of all the things that could have been avoided if maybe this would have happened earlier, but I agree with you both. It's inevitable that we got to start sharing the money around, especially in the billions that they're making. $3 billion sounds like a lot, but it's definitely a small portion of what they've made over that last
And
decade.
does like another thing is, does Dabo, for instance, I don't know what he makes on the top of my head, but does he really need to
lot.
be making $10 million or whatever it is? Like,
Yeah.
he's a really good coach, don't get me wrong. Maybe you pay him half of that, but really, you can't split up half of his contract with the rest of his players who, I mean, pretty much won him national championships. Coaches win national championships too, but I'm pretty sure you need a football player to kind of throw it to another guy and score touchdowns. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. So
I
don't
guarantee you
know.
that's how it works.
Not in this
There's-
offense, baby.
Yeah. That's
The-
we've all taken shots at our own teams today, and it's very healthy. Jake and I did it in the group chat, but that is very, very healthy. Actually, I think JP threw the shade at Iowa State earlier, but
It was
Very,
funny.
very
'Cause I don't know. It was a dumb joke, but it was funny. I thought it was kind of funny.
that
The
is a little
turnover one
teaser.
actually works.
yeah, I
like,
was gonna say
really well.
little teaser.
That's a little teaser. We have a new partnership we're excited to talk about next week, if not definitely the week after. So stay tuned on that. But let's go back to the fun stuff, and that is college football 25. Hype continues to build. Matt Brown really just fueled this week. Set the tone for the week, coming out with some cover athletes. We are officially, well, not officially, tomorrow will be officially in the month that we are going to see the full reveal trailer for this game. So get excited. They
didn't know
talked about
that.
May
Where you been?
16th. Yeah, come on, man.
Under
Follow
a
along.
rock, apparently.
We're the home. Didn't you call us the home of college football 25 news last week?
I
Dial
was
in.
gonna say,
You guys are.
we're leaning into this because we're gonna play the crap out of it, and all we're gonna do is
Yep,
talk about it
that's
in the
true.
first 15 minutes.
And we
of
want
this,
you to be
so-
a part of it. So tune in for that as well. But for cover athletes, it's not like set in stone. They just said there's going to be multiple cover athletes because there's going to be multiple versions of the game. Expect like a deluxe edition, maybe that's available for pre-order. You get 24-hour early access, whatever it is I'm paying for. It doesn't matter. The deluxe edition may have a different cover athlete than another edition, but it will feature each power conference, at least one player from each. That's what we know for sure. So we made up this one: Dylan Gabriel, Ollie Gordon, Cam Ward. This is a perfect example in Luther Burden. That's all Power 4 conferences, and these could be 4 players that you see. JP, I want to hear your guesses, takes on who you think is for sure in on the cover and who you think should be left out from the names that have been swirling around social media.
If he gets to his mic, I can take it over for him.
Yeah, you go ahead, Jake, and we'll go back to JP.
apparently,
I don't-
Dog has something to say. He just knocked my headphones out.
I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that guy, but I mean, we wouldn't be completely surprised if Shedeur Sanders or Travis Hunter isn't on the cover, will we?
I would be surprised if Shedeur is. I think that would be absolutely asinine to put that guy on the cover. Travis, I can hear it because I think he is at least a top 3 defensive back in college football, but Shedeur, no.
He's projected the number 1 pick in most odds markets right now.
Yeah, no, that's
So,
not happening. It's
what
not
is-
happening. It would just defeat the purpose of the game. Like, look at the past games. We've always had either the Heisman winner or somebody uberly successful in college football. We're just taking this guy because social media says he's really good and his team won 4 games. Like, it just defeats the purpose. Like, you have to dominate the sport to get on the cover. The other guys did. I will not hear.
I think
Shedeur.
we're
That
lacking
would
some
piss me off.
superstar cover
Yeah,
athlete.
we
talent
are
right now.
lacking super. I agree, JP.
At least, right? It feels like it at this moment for this coming year.
I think at quarterback, I can agree there, but like Ollie Gordon's a cover athlete from what he did.
Yeah, but how many people know Ollie Gordon? That are gonna buy
Right.
this
And he
game?
didn't end up in the top 5 in the Heisman race last year. Like,
because he plays
it's-
running back. Like,
I know.
it's-
That's what there's a little bit of a
like you could.
I hear
There's
what
a
you're
lot-
saying.
There's a lot
I
of
don't
good
know.
names. There's a lot of good athletes. I think college football is as talented as it's ever been, like across the board. But I think it's lacking superstar power, at least, right now in the month of
this
April.
moment.
We haven't seen anybody step up. And I think last year, this draft class that just happened a week ago was a really talented class.
My question arose when I was making this graphic. I was trying to pick an ACC player. Obviously, I think Luther Burden's like it's got to be a lock at wide receiver, especially like being the SEC representative. I don't see it at quarterback, and I don't see it at running back anymore with Judkins going to the Big Ten. So I think he's a lock there. But I'm trying to pick an ACC player that could have been featured here. Like Cam Ward stuck out to me, but who's my other choice? Like DJU at Florida State. I don't know the other people in the running there. It's got to be a lineman, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Though. I don't know. I'm trying to think too, but like, you're not putting Cade Klubnik. North Carolina, I'm not even sure who will be the quarterback there next year. Yeah, I don't know. It also is crazy that like, what are we looking at there? 2 of the 4 of our cover that we made on our own is a transfer this year. I mean, I'm assuming Parks, you pulled those 2 from spring ball pictures.
Correct. Like, spring game, like from the last 2 days. Yes.
So I think that's another thing we definitely didn't have back when the game was made last, is this transfer portal era. Like guys could just have a whole different look in 3 months.
I'll tell you this. I had to pull the uniform for Oregon from the spring game, and I had to put the logo of the game over the Pac-12 logo. That's how early we are. So they don't even have the Big Ten logo on there yet. I had to cover it up. JP, going back to you, who would you like to see on the cover? Who's kind of somebody you expect, and who's somebody that you don't want to see?
Who am I expecting? I think Travis Hunter makes a lot of sense. So I'm kind of expecting that. Who I'd like to see the ability for if GameStop's still selling these, or if we're doing digital stuff, like you get to pick who it is. I felt like back in the day you could make the custom ones and then they'd put those into the sleeve for certain orders. But I don't know. I don't know where you would go. Yeah,
I think
Quinn
Ewers
could be a good one.
But Ewers isn't even getting the same hype that his backup is getting.
You got to remember Luther's the SEC bid.
I think Carson Beck would also be. I think he's up there with Luther Burden. If somebody was to match Luther, Carson Beck will be one of the most talked about college football players by the end of September. I really do think that, and it'll help that he's on the number 1 team in the country. But he will be talking once the draft stuff starts circulating around him and who's going to be the first quarterback taken, and Georgia's undefeated. He's going to be a big name in college football. But right now, again, like Georgia wasn't in the playoff last year, so he's not talked about as much.
Fair enough. All right. We had to get into our college football 25 talk. Hit the subscribe button to stay updated on all that. Anything that comes out, we're going to talk about it, post something about it. We're going to cover you all the way through it. You'll never miss any of Matt Brown's tweets, who's also done a great job updating us throughout this game. But we are officially tomorrow, if you're listening, in the month of May, in the month that we are going to see the full reveal trailer. Hopefully that gets here sooner than later because we are super pumped for it. But all right, we are going into the transfer portal. Let's talk the portal window that closes tonight at midnight. That's Tuesday, April 30th. It is closed officially at midnight. And there are some names still floating out there. Let's start with Ole Miss wide receiver Zachary Franklin. He entered the portal. He played in 4 games last year and had over 3,000 yards in his time at UTSA a couple years back. Dylan Edwards committed to Kansas State, the Colorado running back who saw a lot of time last year as a freshman, was running back 1 for them. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Reese called it, committed to Auburn, and he will play in the SEC next year. He'll make an immediate impact down there. Jaden Rashada commits to Georgia. He takes the same role as Dante Moore at Oregon, and he will play the backup role to Beck. Really good backup player to have. I mean, Beck gets hurt. You got somebody with experience ready to play, which is awesome for Georgia. Damian Martinez commits to Miami, who had a massive week recruiting and transfer-wise. He was Pac-12 Freshman of the Year at Oregon State. If you haven't looked him up because he's going to make an impact at Miami. Jason Zandamela is crystal ball to Florida by 247. He's an offensive lineman. He's the number 7th ranked player in the portal right now. Is that official yet? Any updates on that from when we put this in there?
No, I haven't seen.
Okay, still crystal balled. And then the last couple, according to Pete Nakos from On3, Texas is the clear favorite for TCU. Defensive tackle Dominic Richardson, and then SMU's offensive tackle Marcus Bryant committed to Missouri, who also had a nice couple of additions added this past week, and he was first team all AAC. Anybody that sticks out? Let's lead it off. I'll send one down to you, Jake. Dylan Edwards staying intra Big 12 now that Colorado's playing the Big 12 this year. Do you think this is a good ad for TCU, not TCU, for K-State? And could he make an immediate impact for that school?
Yes and yes, unfortunately. But no, for those who are Cowboy has an argument. Well, Cowboy's kind of right because for the casual fan, Dylan Edwards will not be the number one back for this team. If you got to remember, DJ Giddens will rush for another 1,000 yards this year, just like he did last year at Kansas State. But Kansas State's always had really good success with Deuce Vaughn, Darren Sproles, like these little small backs who are really good in the passing game. They've just turned them into mega stars. So to a 1-2 punch for the co-favorites in the Big 12, that's a huge get for them. I hate to admit it. Let's hope he just doesn't decommit by June or transfer out again. Because for those who don't remember, he was committed to K-State originally, then turned his commitment to Notre Dame, then turned his commitment to Colorado. But that's just kind of the world we live in.
Anybody else that stuck out from the list of names that I went through that you think is going to make an immediate impact? I think Lambert Smith's one that jumps off to me, but anybody else?
Yeah, two really. Marcus Bryant, the offensive tackle for SMU, he was the number one tackle kind of available a couple of weeks ago. He was the first team in the American Conference last year at SMU. Really good. Missouri, just like Ole Miss, man, they keep trying to hit the home run this year. They're going to go all in on their chances for a college football playoff berth and a national title run because they'll have multiple swings at it. So that was an interesting ad. And then again, on the other side, like Zachary Franklin, battled by injury last year, but me and JP love this kid. Like he was really good going into the transfer portal out of UTSA. So kind of hope he finds a spot in the Power 4 somewhere. Hopefully he doesn't take a step down to the G5 because I think the talent's still there. But I could see him going to an ACC or a Big 12. So I guess a lesser step than the SEC.
JP, I'll throw it up to you. We take a look at Damian Martinez. He commits to Miami. He'll join Cam Ward and probably one of the better 1-2 punches in the ACC this year. They're third in the conference, plus 650 to win it. Do you see this being enough of an ad for them to add to that backfield where maybe those odds go up?
Yeah, I think when you look at Damian Martinez Miami adding Damian Martinez, like Cristobal is going to want to run the football. Now he's gotten a workhorse who's proven 1,000-yard guy in power conferences against really good defenses. Now his ability to be the guy in Miami and not have all the pressure on Cam Ward and getting the football out to the weapons they've added at receiver in the portal, like they have a guy they can lean on and really win them football games down the stretch, right? So I think this is like Cristobal 101. Like this is what he wanted more than anything, was probably get a running back like this, and he just happened to be gifted probably the best one in the portal this year. Like in some ways, like that's huge for them. Now, are they going to be crazy favorited to win the ACC? Are they going to be a better football team? Are they going to win more games? I don't know. Yet to be seen. I'll have to see it to believe it with Miami for this point in time.
I mean, and this is just
go ahead, Jake.
This is typical Cristobal. Like he dominates recruiting. Now he dominates the transfer portal. I think everybody's just kind of waiting and seeing. Like,
I just want you to win 9 games and make me think
let's
about
see
you.
it on the field one time. Yeah. And they did add Sam Brown too, was a top 100 transfer from Houston. He's going to be a receiver, like JP said, just another weapon for Cam Ward. So the offense, it has definitely got potential. The excuses are gone for him.
It's a plus minus for Cristobal, in my opinion, because it's not hard to recruit to Miami. It can't be. It legitimately can't be with the facilities they have and just the general location and how fun of a city Miami is or is said to be. But it's also like, you know, he's got some pressure on him. He made his coaching mistakes last year and he really hasn't gotten the job done. But when you're loading up like this consistently and you still can't get the job done, I think he's adding some pressure maybe that the national media is not talking about. Like he's got to do it now, especially with the team that he brought in this year.
I was going to say, I think maybe a fun segment we could do this summer where we pick a bunch of coaches out, but what's the number that Cristobal has to win this year? Number of wins.
I like that. Hit. Yeah, you could have those. I mean,
what are they at? 8.5 has got to be their Vegas number, right?
Yeah, I think so.
9 or 10 would be my numbers. I would probably think with the team that he has and the conference outlook overall.
That it is.
Yeah, that would be my number. JP, would you 9 or 10?
Yeah, I'd say 9. 9 has an outside looking in perspective at a college football playoff spot. 10 probably gets you in and most
Mhm.
likely into a conference title game.
You got to
Yeah,
remember
that's just again.
they play Florida week 1 too.
Yeah, we'll know quick
Yep,
about both
that's
those teams.
not a lot of warm up time. That's a good point. But all right, let's go on to the next point, and that is the Group of 5 playoff. I'm going to try and give you the Spark Note rundown of all of this. There's a lot of information. We will link the article out there for you to read it, but there is a ton of stuff in here. This is basically what I took away from it. If I didn't hit on every note, JP, Jake, make sure you add in on it. But basically, what the article says from Derek Dooley, the former Tennessee coach, he is going on to pitch the Group of 5 playoff backed by a private equity firm. And all you need to know about the private equity firm is they're not going to be named, but they got a shitload of money that can make this oil run, right? So that's really the outline of the money part of it. They've got it in their back pocket. They think it stemmed from disappointment and anger at the new revenue sharing. The new revenue sharing will provide $1.8 million a year to the average program in the Group of 5, which there's 62 teams, and you got to be just average at the top to get that share of 1.8 million. And you may say, that sounds like pretty good. They were making 1.5. So the number's up from what they were making in the past. However, the percentage of the split is far, far down. It used to be 22% in the playoff era from 2014 to 2023. Now the new era, they are getting 9%. So it got cut tremendously. I mean, it's going to be a huge hit to some of these programs when it comes to staying running, especially when they're not going to be able to get scheduled when the committee comes out and says they're not going to give you any credit for bad football games. Like, why are we not getting the money? They're not going to be scheduled if you're a good team. You're not going to be able to make your case. One possible scenario for this to happen is 8 division champs play for the one college football playoff bid. And those division champs would come from a realigned Group of 5 based off, I think it was based off their location, correct?
Yeah. So this is going into the scenario. I think, what did we talk about this 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
That was pitched for like 10 geographical conferences or divisions made now with everybody. I think that's basically what it includes. So Power 5 or Power 4 and the rest of the G5.
Yeah, and that's basically how it would work, is that they would play those 8 division champions later in the year, would play for that one automatic bid to the college football playoff, which it could really weed out some Group of 5 teams that maybe aren't that good, but also I think the realignment itself would. Here are the obstacles that come with the Group of 5 playoff. They would have to rework media rights to get these things on TV. There's a lot of media rights, a lot of money floating around, and they would have to rework those to find a way to make this work, and that's a lot of money to be asking them to move around in favor of just helping your 62 teams that don't make a ton of money. And then it would also need unanimous approval from the 5 teams, the commissioners, or whatever you want to call them. The 5 conferences, as of now, the Group of 5 would need unanimous approval from each conference to make this move forward. But that's basically the Spark Notes I have of it. Add anything I missed. There's a lot in the article. So like I said, read it. But basically, the first thing I want to ask you while you're adding is, what do you think of it, JP?
I don't know if I like the private equity part of it. My worry is that this is, I mean, obviously this is pure business to them, and college football is a business, but making a product out of this where you're not owned by a commissioner of the sport, you're owned by a private equity firm that needs to see returns. Like, what happens in 4 years? Let's just say this is running for 4 years, 5 years, whatever. And the numbers aren't quite what they want. They're probably going to be unrealistic numbers that they're wanting out of this thing, right? Because you're going to bump up against the college football playoff itself. You're going to bump up against the NFL. You're going to bump into other things. If your ratings go down and it's not making the same money, and they say, actually, we're going to pull the plug on this or whatnot, now what? I feel like those schools and those conferences are in a worse spot than they are at this moment in time by getting private equity firm like backing this. I think it needs to become from somewhere where it's the NCAA creating of the playoff, or it's a committee within the Group of 5 or in a college football massive umbrella that creates this and makes it happen. I don't know the private equity firm's the way to go. Now, again, this is stuff over my head in a lot of situations, but I do worry about the downfall of it, because I feel like that could be really ugly, and that could really hurt these schools, really hurt these schools, because if they start losing football and other things, what's the difference between the University of Toledo and Marian University? or Morningside and Ball State in some cases. Like if they start losing money in all these athletics and they got to start cutting programs, like they're going to see the wrong side of this. Now, positive side is that you are now kind of giving them a shot at actually competing for a national title or working towards one at least. Like, where do you getting one team in is fine, but it doesn't represent the group of 5 necessarily as it should be, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but like I don't know, I feel like you're losing something if you're just hoping and praying that one of these years the 12 knocks off the 5 somewhere and we're sitting there talking about SMU or not SMU, like Memphis playing Georgia in the second round, right? Like, I don't know. I just feel like they're missing something here that needs to be captured.
Jake, down to you. Initial thoughts on the article, anything that I missed that you want to add in, and what do you just think of the grand idea itself?
No, that was good by Jordan. Private equity is it's not the way to go. You're giving somebody too much power, and it can really destroy these universities in general.
Private equity ruins businesses. Like, again, I'm not a business.
You don't want to give,
but like you lose when the business side loses because of private equity. What the hell is college football going to do when it's smaller schools that have no say?
Yeah. So the minute like this stuff, if it goes private equity and the minute the G5 tournament or playoff isn't working, the first year, if it's not making money, they're just going to cut it. And then what? Where are you leaving these programs? To flip it to the other side, we've always been a G5 podcast. This is what we've been. But what's with this all stems from the evils of making an extended big playoff and all these TV deals and conference realignment. So it's always goes back to the heads of college football who started this. But since when did the G5 kind of get an attitude of like they deserve a little bit of this cut? And I don't know, they're kind of being beggars. Like they just complain about wanting to be having a seat at the table of this new extended playoff. And it's just like, and also with the percentages, and they're complaining about that. And it's like, guys, we're not playing the same sport. Like I understand.
But, I mean,
especially when the powers are leaving. The powers are leaving from the G5. Like,
yeah,
you don't have Houston anymore. You don't have SMU anymore.
You're losing your depth in your conferences. Your players are transferring to higher schools before they get to the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. You're not performing as well. Like go back. Like I think Josh Pate showed a statistic of what the G5 record was against Power 5 last year. It's terrible. It was really bad. It was like 4-28 or something. And I'm sure Iowa State had to put that little statistic on there. See, there's another slight I can throw at us, guys. This is all
growing up.
But yeah, it's just, why don't you just take with what you can get? And if you guys would allow me when we get to it, I do have my own pitch since we have time and it's April. I want to throw my own pitch there. I just don't, they want a seat at the big boy table, but at the same time, why wouldn't you just enjoy a playoff of your own? Like the FCS doesn't complain about not having a seat at, why don't we get our national champion in an automatic qualifier for the Big 12 team playoff? We're all playing football, aren't we? We're all technically Division I football. No, it's not. It's not the same budget. It's not the same scholarships. They're not the same players. It's not the same size, facilities, fan bases, you name it. It's not the same world.
It'd be different though. Like, cause if you put it into like real world terms, Jake, you work a job, you have people that work at the job with you. They're all have the same title. Maybe these people get larger accounts. They're making more money or blah, blah, blah. However you want to paint this picture. Right. And you're like going into the sales meeting at the year end and you're like, hey, like I have a couple opinions too on how to run this business, but you and Timothy are only 5% of the sales and the 95%, but there's 4 guys there that are 95% of it. Who do you think they're going to listen to? Right. But you, because it's your job and it's your money and it's you trying to make things better for you, you've got to fight back because you're still part of it. You want to be a part of it. Otherwise just get swept under the rug and you become pointless.
100%.
Now, if they didn't fight back and they didn't stay in the news and they didn't, battle to make more money for themselves and make themselves better conferences, then they're literally just going to float with the wind. Like they're not even going to have a chance to create something for themselves. They're not going to have any backing by anybody. They're already probably losing scheduling rights to get some of these bye games in. And they're more likely to drop to FCS than become their own entity on, in between the FCS and what we would call the college football playoff level. I don't
Yep.
know, come up with something better, people in marketing, but it's you have to push back if you're them. Like, you have to give
Yeah.
yourself a shot. And yeah, like there is like some legitimacy to be like, yeah, this isn't quite the same. Like, it's not an even playing field. It's stupid to act like it is, because if you treat two things the same that aren't the same, one of them is going to get screwed over. And so it's the natural world of business and people at a
Trying to
table that
survive.
just trying to just argue things out because no one wants to budge a little bit. Like, in no world, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but in the world, you can only one thing or the other thing. It's actually illegal to be right in the middle of it and have opinions on both sides, it seems. But that's probably where they're at, is like they have all these commissioners and guys that want the best for these conferences. And then you have the other side where they're like, we don't need you to do this, but you can't see eye to eye, and nobody's going to find the middle ground in this situation, which sucks, because we talked about how good the Boise State teams were. We talked about how good the SMU teams were. We talked about how good Tulane's been. We've talked about like the Nevada teams, the Hawaii teams. They would walk circles around the G5
Yeah,
schools.
but it's
at
not.
this
It's
point.
exactly. It's not the same.
But it's not the
anymore.
same, because these kids leave. They have opportunities to leave and legitimately get paid and play at the level that maybe is more like them, if that makes any sense. Like, as Akari Franklin like lit up Conference USA and the American, and then they're like, actually, I can go play at Ole Miss now, injury troubles and whatnot. But there's a boatload of guys like that.
Well, look at the kid from Toledo that got drafted the other night in the first round, the Mitchell kid. He decided to stay, decided to stick it out, but there was one G5 player selected in the first round, and Nick Saban went on and said he was our number one player in the transfer portal class. Like, he was who we were going after. So even though he decided to stay, which is super rare and good on him, the talent's just not the same anymore, and it's because of that. And it's going to be very rare to see guys like that Mitchell dude stick around and still try to be a first round draft pick.
Yeah, because like Parks, like you touch on this, like most of the kids that get the opportunity to bump up from G5 to or Power 5 or Power 4 now or whatever, most of those guys are probably late round draft picks anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get a pay bump to go play at Alabama or to play at Ohio State or to play at USC from you're at Cal Poly or New Hampshire or Bowling Green or whatever, go down the list. You now have the opportunity to make that money, maybe stay for an extra year. Maybe you A, get better tape out there, B, you get more resources while you're there, so you get a little better, a little bulkier, and then you make your money. But you're making money now, guaranteeing yourself something in this pot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of if you stay at the school and you go late round, like that's all you get. Like, there's no NIL money there in the first or last 2 years of your college years, whether that's junior year, senior year, you leave.
Yeah, I'm wondering, my initial question that came up, and I had two of them. One was, I don't think that the commissioners of the conferences are as aware as the coaches are of what we're talking about. Like, we posted it a couple months ago now, where the coach was texting back and forth to the Power 5 transfer and wanting to come to the Group of 5 and said, hey man, like, we don't have any money for you. Like, that's not what it's about here. But the other question that popped up was, what's the number? What number were they looking for? Percent of their revenue would have been where it's like, all right, we're good. We're getting our piece of the pie. We can continue on until something else changes. We just want
anything less than what they were getting, maybe. Like,
yeah,
I think, I think they would have tried for anything.
But
22% is a lot.
It's
for
a
one
lot.
spot.
I mean,
for one slot, yeah.
We're giving Notre Dame 10% now, just to put that on the table. But you're also now asking for the same percentage when you lost SMU, you lost Houston, you lost UCF, you lost Cincinnati. Like, they're getting weaker as they go on. Like, they don't Tulane, Memphis, that's your strong suits now. I mean,
I think it starts with the collectives too. Like, the FedEx giving 25 million to Memphis is a step in the right direction, but it is on these schools now to start these collectives. Like, some of these MAC schools and stuff, they do not have collectives and NIL funds ready for these kids. And if you want to start being a better product, you got to keep the talent, and you can't keep getting poached like this. So, unfortunately, it starts with your own school, your own fan base, and if you really care enough to want to keep your players around. But how many of the MAC fans, like, I might piss some MAC fans off, but like, how many Ohio fans, do you think Ohio fans have a favorite Big Ten team that they root for too, or do they just root for MAC schools? I
Well,
just don't
Probably.
you would think that most of the people there that are fans are alumni.
Yeah.
And so they probably didn't grow up as Ohio Bobcats. They might have grown up as Buckeyes or Wolverines or whoever, or Irish, whatever you want to say. And then that is like that's their main fandom, right? But they probably have a side fandom or vice versa. Like they get listen, Athens kicks off at 6:30 on Tuesday night, but I got my side lady over here on Saturday at 11 a.m. on Big Noon kickoff. Like I can do both things here, right? Just working the schedule there.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I do want to go back and ask, based off of what was proposed, the 8 divisions that play against each other for the slot in the college football playoff, the 8 divisions, is that a plus side for the things? I mean, those, you got to think those group of 5 games are going to be watched more than Central Michigan and Ohio late in the year. Like people are going to watch the 2 good teams that have a chance for them to be watching. So that could make the money, but is it enough to make up that business model? Like, what are the plus things that you see here? Like, what's good for the group of 5, JP?
Man, it's tough because like those rivalries exist within the conferences. So if you start
Right.
divisioning them
That
out and
hurts.
like ruin that hurts the fan bases a lot. But I think what it does give you is if you beat the power schools to a better alignment, a better conference look, a better division look, like they're probably going to be looking over at like, look what the group of 5's doing. Like that looks a lot more fun than, UCLA and Rutgers or whatever. I guess that's the dramatic version of it all, but it's the reality as well. Like that probably is a little more attractive to watch that in your 8-team pod or your 5-team pod than it is your massive Big 10, massive SEC, massive Big 12. Like I don't know. Like who are you going to argue with outside of the social media sphere? Jake is an Iowa State fan. Like Arizona State fans, Arizona fans, like you'll never run into these people. And
Right.
that's kind of half of it. So like maybe it does get to a point if they hit it on the head right, and you kind of look at that and you're like that. Now that looks like the right way to do things. Maybe that's where their influence comes from, and maybe they can be trendsetters and really set something off in the right foot. That's the positive I got. Like if you can be the example that again, we don't know what to call the big schools in this situation, but like that the college football playoff wants to be, like, I think that's huge.
Jake, what about you? Positive side of things, what can work out? What's the best case scenario for the G5 if this move's made?
Well, that they get their money, I suppose, so that they can sustain their programs and keep the conferences together, because we all do enjoy Conference USA on Wednesdays and Maction on Tuesdays in November and things like that. So that's the best case scenario. But I think there's more that this league, if they do keep players around and keep familiar faces within the program and coaches and all that kind of stuff, I think there is a tournament out there that they can deserve, and I think can get some spotlight, and I think can really be good for the G5s of college football. Because I just don't think, how much longer is the Hawaii Bowl really going to sustain and like keep it relevant in college football? Like, are we really going to keep tuning in to this really watered down bowl game in Detroit every single year at 2:30 on a Thursday? Like these bowl games can't continue to thrive. I'm assuming like they're gonna realize they're not making much money and they're gonna disband it eventually, right? Like it's just getting too much and it's getting watered down. It's like why people say bowl games don't matter anymore.
Fair enough. All right. Closing thoughts from the group. Obviously, we went through a lot on the G5 playoff. We'll have a video out separately of this if you need to go back and recap it, because it's not, everything's pending, right? Like nothing's final. This is just a proposed item. Jake?
Can I make my proposal of a tournament before we head out of here? We got 10 minutes. So, well,
10 minutes.
I don't I gotta really
we got it. Give us your proposal.
So, first of all, the name. This tournament isn't perfect by any means. There's some flaws to it, but it's the idea that counts. So the Northern Illinois AD has been like vouching for like an NIT playoff basically in college football. And I kind of sat there and thought about it, and I tend to agree. So this is my G5/NIT college football tournament at the end of the year. This will take place instead of bowl games, keep in mind. The first thing in mind I'm going to do, and you guys might roll your eyes at me or whatever, I'm expanding the real playoff to 16 teams. So that's it. That's final. That's what we're going to do. We're making the 16-team playoff. You're going to get your 5 SECs, your 5 Big Tens, and then whatever else comes with it. So that being said, I'm going to make a 12-team playoff separate of that. This is going to be my G5 tournament. So who's going to be able to qualify? Who's going to be in this tournament out of the 12 teams? I have my 5 automatic conference champs from the MAC, American, help me out here, Sun Belt, Conference USA, and
the Mountain West.
Mountain West. Thank you. Thank you very much. So those are going to be my G5 auto bids. And then my at-large bids, there's going to be, out of the 12, I'm going to give you like 3 more at-large G5s. So there's a lot of good teams. You know, Air Force would have been a good at-large last year, UNLV, some to just name. And then we're going to fill the last, it depends on the year, the last 3, 4, maybe just 2 spots. We're going to put Power 4 bids in that conference. So here's the qualifier. If the Big 12 and the ACC only get 2 teams each into the real playoff, they can have teams compete in this tournament. So it's got to be the 2 lesser Power 4 school conferences that can get more large bids. So if Tennessee's ranked 18th and they didn't qualify for the actual playoff, you're not getting in this playoff. You already have 5 SEC schools. You're already getting your cut. So like last year, I'll actually go through what last year's would have looked like. Okay, so that's what we got. And then this also still allows the conference championships to mean something, the G5s. Also competing for a conference championship, like if I'm Toledo and I lost to Miami of Ohio, like it still means something to make the MAC championship because you can still get an at-large bid in this tournament. My arguments for this is we're getting rid of oversaturated bowl games with these 6-win MAC teams, these 6-win Conference USA teams. It doesn't make any sense. My last thing I forgot to say, for those G5 auto bids, you have to have at least 8 wins, 8 total wins in your season if you're going to get an at-large bid. And the Power 4 conferences, those 2 teams or 3 teams that get in, you at least have to have 9 wins. So there are going to be like a 9-win Kansas State team that might not make the actual playoff some years. So that's the qualifiers. And then also, I'm making 1 portal window. I know this has nothing to do with the
random, but
we
yeah,
we gotta keep these players in this tournament. We got to keep them in the playoffs. Like we got to make this interesting. So I'm either doing it in later January, so it gives them some time to think about it, or I'm just making the spring window. It is what it is. You got to go through spring ball. I don't even care if it's your loss if you want to transfer. So that being said, if I mapped it out between a 12-team playoff and the 16-team playoff, depending on how you do it, it's 25 games, 25 meaningful tournament games that you're playing with versus 43 oversaturated, bad bowl games where people are opting out. Stop chasing quantity over quality. If the FCS can get a tournament on ESPN, if they can get their playoff games on ESPN every year, like the quarterfinals, semifinals, championship game, like why couldn't this make a deal? We talk about private equity and other investors. Like if the FCS can do it, the G5 can certainly do it if they want to make their own playoff. So that being said, what would this have looked like last year if this had been a thing? Your number 1 seed, let's give you the first 4 seeds. So your number 1 seed would have been Kansas State. Kansas State would have missed the 16-team playoff, but had 9 wins. Actually, they would have made the technical real playoff because they did win their conference championship. So that would have been a little interesting. Number 2 would have been NC State, would have been the 2 seed. They had 9 wins. They would have qualified. They weren't in their conference championship. Louisville, Florida State, Clemson would have made it ahead of them. SMU would be the 3rd seed. I think that at the end of the year, this was your best G5 team available. Number 4 would have been Kansas. So those are your top 4 seeds. So the 5 versus 12 matchup, I have Liberty versus Ohio. Liberty's the 5. Ohio is an at-large. They get the 12. They won 10 games. Number 6 seed is Miami of Ohio because they won their conference. They beat Toledo. So Miami of Ohio would play the number 11 UNLV. Number 7, James Madison. They won the Sun Belt. That's your 7th seed. They're playing Toledo. I would enjoy that matchup last year.
Wild that you have James Madison ranked below Miami of Ohio or seated below them. But I
Yeah,
see what you're
I
saying.
probably would have switched
And
it,
Liberty.
but yeah. And then number 8, I got Boise State versus number 9, Tulane. Because Boise won theirs, so I'll give them the 8 seed. So it's definitely not perfect. And like I said, I already kind of messed it up because Kansas State would have made it in. So maybe we put somebody else in that spot, maybe another G5. But
No, you didn't mess it up. Kansas State wouldn't have made it in. Texas won the Big 12. That was 2 years ago.
oh God, I made that Max Duggan
Yeah.
TikTok today, and that's what I keep getting in my mind.
Yeah.
So thank you. All right.
You
So
were
I
right.
wasn't completely off. Okay. There we go.
So
Yeah. What do we got thoughts on that?
Your biggest issue is that teams are going to look at it like the NIT. Like,
Thank you.
let's say that Kansas State's
Yeah.
not going to want to play.
That's what I was
going to
say.
They're going to be like, no, actually, we want to get healthy and we want to hit the portal hard and make sure we have guys staying.
Which is fine.
I just think if you're gonna go the route of the group of 5, let's go the route of the group of 5 and like keep it that way, if that makes sense. Because otherwise, you're just gonna run into the whole sportscasters ball being like, this is a meaningless game for Kansas State. It's a no-win situation. It's a no-win situation for Colorado or a no-win situation for NC State. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's what you're gonna run into.
The reason I put those in was because like these G5s are saying, hey, we can compete with them. Okay. So here's your lesser P4 schools that are almost similar in size and matchups or whatever. Go beat these teams. I don't know.
Transferring or not, I think the problem you run into is piggybacking off of JP's point. I think you're one of the only fans I've ever met, and it's 100% the truth and realistic. So we appreciate your take for it that will admit that those conferences are lesser. Like those kids going to K-State and Colorado committing there are fully invested that they're going to somewhere equally as good as the Big Ten and the SEC. We know it, that it's not, and they should be viewed differently. And a lot of the teams don't know that. Like SMU does not view themselves differently than
SMU got that money though.
Mississippi State, right? Like they're not saying anymore, that is, but you're the only one that I've seen willing to admit that. And I do think you're going to run into a bunch of opt-outs of players like that play for K-State. Like, I'm not playing. What's the benefit of me?
So my opt-out thing, my 2 rebuttals were, if, for instance, if Iowa State can basically put a full team together last year against Memphis in the Liberty Bowl, like why couldn't these teams in a tournament that also you're playing for money, like we'll throw money in for the winner. It's going to help out the school, the conference, etc.
Okay.
And the second thing is that's why I'm also moving the portal. I'm almost thinking move it to spring ball. Like, I'm sorry, I'm all for kids. You can go wherever you want, but guess what? Go through spring ball again. Go through spring ball with your school. Then you can decide if you really want to leave. You're also making the sacrifice. Well, then I'd be jumping in summer ball and I missed out on that spring opportunity. Guys, we got to make a repercussion to some of these transfer portals. Like, I'm all for kids wanting to move if they want to, but there's got to be a little bit of a consequence or sacrifice that you have to take if you're going to move. So that's why I'm just all for maybe making it in the spring portal, the spring window being the only time to move during the year.
I will give you props. I did think there was a couple of matchups when you went through the teams that jumped out. Like, I would be genuinely excited to watch that. Like, think of Ole Miss, Tulane last year. Like, that was a legitimately exciting, close game that everybody played in.
Here's another thing. Let me list off those 4 teams that with the top 4 teams again for you guys, and think about the coach. Think about the bowl game they played this year, and think about who they put in those bowl games. And if you tell me if they would opt out, Kansas State and Chris Kleiman, Dave Doran and NC State, SMU and Lance Leipold in Kansas, like when Rhett Lashley and SMU too. So those 4 schools, like Kansas really wanted to be in that bowl game last year against UNLV. Kansas State, Chris Kleiman's teams are always going to give their best shot. Dave Doran, same thing. So it's not like we're going to get like the Iowa States of the world. Like, this is for like me too. Like, yes, we want a shot at the real playoff, but also I'm realistic and something that could be fun and exciting. I didn't even talk about whether or not we should actually just make them bowl games or neutral set or home games. I kind of left that up there, but the teams that are going to be in this playoff are going to actually like have players that give a shit and are good culture schools. Like, that's what the middle of the pack is for. That's what, if you didn't make the 16-team playoff, that's why we don't want you, Tennessee, if you got left out at 18, because we know you don't give a shit about these bowl games anyway. So that's really what it's for.
That one, I think you hit the nail on the head. JP, I'll give you your closing thoughts. Great pitch. We'll let the people decide, though. JP, closing thoughts on Jake's pitch.
Plug in the 4 last place teams from the power conference and make them play to keep their spot within the power conferences. Again, very
Relegation.
unrealistic, but we go, hey, Vanderbilt, hey, who was
That's
the
our
last one they said
relegation
last
idea.
year?
I've all been
Yeah.
on. I'm all.
But
for
I'm saying to
relegation.
plug them into that playoff, like talk about
Yeah.
giving a shit. You better give a shit, or you're not gonna have a place to play next year, buddy.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Okay, so I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So like instead of Kansas State, NC State, it's like
Indiana,
Virginia,
Vanderbilt, Virginia. Yeah,
You got to go win. You got to go at least compete in this tournament, or you're
Yeah.
gonna be out of.
you gotta
Power
win.
Five.
You gotta win, or you lose. You lose your spot.
And
I
they
love
would
that.
play it with all their heart, because you're talking about when they get relegated like that, then they're getting less of that revenue split. So it does hurt the school overall. Like they would have to take that serious. That could work.
Yes.
Here's my problem that I didn't think about until now with relegation, and I like relegation, but wouldn't teams just opt out? Like wouldn't players just leave right before these
They
games
might.
even happen? Because they're like, oh well, if we're gonna be relegated next year, I'm not sticking around. Like wouldn't
Well,
you
it's
see
their
a-
fault they're getting relegated.
that's
Yeah,
that's
that's
true.
what it
Being
is.
honest,
But there is
Like,
no
who's gonna
brand
want?
loyalty.
Who's gonna want
There
the
is no
quarterback of a
school loyalty.
relegated football team?
Yeah.
Sorry, you can go play at Grandview. I don't give a shit. Like, there's got to be repercussions to this stuff.
That's fair.
That's why I had the spring portal. Like I think we need to make one window, and we're getting
There's
off
too many
topic
things
now,
wrong
but
with.
we
the
got to make
sport.
repercussions for everybody.
I know.
Sorry.
I feel like we're fixing the shit that we don't need to fix too. Like we say there's a ton of stuff going on in college football that's wrong, transfer problems, tampering problems, and we're like, hey, let's make our own playoff, or maybe let's go to 35 teams in the playoff. Like
What
are we
if-
talking
what if-
about? Maybe
What
fix
if
the
we
problem
only
first.
did a playoff that was 135 teams all at once, week 1 through week 17?
We'll start the bidding at $25 billion ESPN. You want no Fox? Oh, we'll pay it.
Here-
All right.
If
That's
they're
it.
arguing too, if they argue any of this G5 play, just say the FCS does it. Like they're like, well, you can't play it on Saturdays because that's when the college football playoff. No. What does the FCS do? They play their semifinal games, maybe some Friday nights, but it's on Saturdays with bowl games and New Year's Sixes and stuff. So that's what it all stems back to. If the FCS can do this, why can't the G5?
I just think the G5 gets not enough love, and what hurts it more than people realize is it doesn't get media coverage like it should. Like you don't create the excitement. Like how often do you turn on First Take or any other, like the college game day podcast, and they're talking about 9-3 Central Michigan against 10-2 Ohio? Like when are they talking about that? Never. It doesn't
I
even matter
agree.
if those teams are that good.
And
They
just
need
to
talk
say,
about them.
I'm going to say this because I put it in the group chat and I believe it. To say, I think Pate was fighting somebody, to say that if this became a thing, that there would be less people covering it is a fact. I'm sorry, but if you make this a whole different division and its own playoff, it's going to get covered less.
Mhm.
Like that is how this works. Like nobody.
But does it even get covered now? Like if we're being completely
No,
honest.
but it's not going to get covered more. Like
That-
it's going to
yeah.
get covered by gambling shows. These are guys who are just running numbers or just talking
Mhm.
betting lines. They don't give a shit about the actual team. Like that's why I love the Stanford Stephen the Bear podcast, because they knew anything and everything about the ins and outs of college football programs from Temple to fucking Alabama. And that's
Yeah.
why I like that's why I like what we do, because we really work to like pay attention to this stuff because we think it means something. But ESPN will never talk about it. There's not going to be any podcasts talking about it. There's not going to be whatever you want to say that are going to talk about it more because it's its own entity. It's
Yeah.
just not true. That's not true. And like people can argue it or say whatever they say they'll get more. That's just phony because people are going to look down upon it when they see the numbers tank, because you're talking about Tulane UTSA on a Thursday night and not Alabama, Florida. That's 7 weeks from now. And you see your numbers tank, you're not going to talk about them as much. That's just a fact.
There is a question that popped in as we were talking. Let's address this and then we'll wrap everything up. Question came from Austin Berger. With a tournament now, do you think the players knowingly going to the NFL will still opt out or care enough to play for a national championship?
I think me and JP have talked about this. Like, I don't think it's going to be a ton, but you're going to see some names, maybe some second string guys, or either opt in the portal or go to the draft. I would think some guys are going to leave. I don't think you're going to get full participation in these 12 team, 14 team, 16 team playoffs in the future.
Yeah. Can you see like somebody pompous. Let's just say it because everybody's thinking it. Caleb Williams. You know, you may have national championship hopes, but are you willing to go through 3 or 4 games against the toughest competition in college football that can only your draft stock's already as high as it can be? He still went 1-1 and they went 7-5, where you can pretty much only hurt yourself against these good teams. Will he opt out? That's a good question.
Yeah, somebody banged up late in the year and has a chance to come
Yeah.
back round 2. Like, do they even think about it? Like your first
Yeah.
or second round pick. I hope not. I don't think it'll be dramatic like the numbers that we see, but I think there'll be special situations in a lot of spots, right? Yeah, you're gonna have to cut games like that. We've talked about conference titles and what they really mean to people if we're going to continue to expand the playoff, and we talked about killing bye games, which again hurts the G5. But another reality of the situation, you want to add games. These kids are in college; they have their futures they are playing for. You cannot just throw more and more games at them. And if there's revenue split, hey, Jeremy, quarterback 2, yeah, you are not opting out of this. Actually, your revenue split here says you are playing. So maybe that's silver lining of all of it, keeping kids on campus, keeping kids invested.
Bottom line, the NCAA needs to make up some rules and stick to them and not let people work around them. But instead, we'll just keep changing shit before we ever see it on the field. Story of our lives. But all right, that was everything. We went a little long, but Jake gave a great pitch. That's everything on the G5 playoff. If you have any comments, questions, drop them in throughout the week. Send it to a friend. If you're like, hey, do you like college football? Send it over to them. Hit the subscribe button. Let's grow the show. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week, which we will have a ton of stuff to talk about again because the sport is ever changing. But we appreciate you being here. Jake, take us away.
I'm going to do it before we get out of here for Reese. Like, comment, subscribe, and then we're
Thank you.